Life will take you into places you've never been before. Storms you didn't schedule, valleys you didn't plan, uncharted waters that don't come with a map. But I came to tell you, when you don't know where to go, God already knows the way. He is the hand that guides in the dark, the compass when the road disappears, the voice when silence surrounds you. Somebody shout, I may not know where I am, but I know to what show I'm with. If you can trust his guiding hand, you'll walk through places that would have killed others, and you'll come out stronger, wiser, and anointed. Don't be afraid of the unknown. The unknown is where God shows himself the most. You see, when life throws you into places you've never walked before, when you are standing at a crossroad and nothing makes sense, the first thing the enemy tries to plant in your spirit is uncertainty. That fear that whispers, what if you don't make it? What if you fail? What if the ground beneath you gives way? And it is in those moments that you have to remind yourself, God's hand is stronger than your uncertainty. You may not know the route, but he knows the destination. You may not understand the season, but he holds the times and the seasons in his hand. His grip on you is tighter than your grip on him. Think about it. When a child is learning to walk, baby doesn't hold on to the parent. The parent holds on to the child. That toddler might wobble, stumble, even fall. The hand of the Father keeps them from falling flat on their face. That's how God holds you. Your faith may wobble, your courage may stumble, your plans may collapse, but the Father's hand is steady, unshaken, unmovable. The child doesn't have to understand balance. They just need to trust the hand that's guiding them. And in the same way, you don't have to understand the whole journey. You just have to trust that his hand will not let you go. Life will often place you in situations that make you question everything. You lose a job you thought you'd retire from. A relationship you built your whole world on suddenly crumbles. The doctor gives you a report that shakes you to the core. And in those moments, voice of uncertainty is loud. It says, you're finished, you're done. You won't survive this. But let me tell you, the voice of God is louder than the voice of fear. God says, I know the plans I have for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future. His hand is already in tomorrow while you're still trying to survive today. When Peter stepped out of the boat to walk on water, it wasn't the water that held him up. It was the hand of Jesus that made the impossible possible. When Peter started to sink, when doubt and fear overtook him, the scripture says Jesus immediately reached out his hand and caught him. That's what God does for you. When your uncertainty pulls you down, his hand reaches lower than your failure to lift you higher than your fear. You may be in deep waters, but his hand is deeper still. Think about the GPS in your car. Sometimes it takes you on a route you've never been on before. And if you don't trust it, you start to panic. You wonder, why are we turning here? Why are we going through this road? This doesn't look familiar, but the GPS knows something you don't. It knows the bigger map. And even when you miss a turn, it doesn't give up on you. It simply recalculates and says, rerouting. That's how God's hand works. You may feel lost, you may have taken a wrong turn. He never throws you away. His hand will reroute your mistakes and still guide you into destiny. Sometimes we think uncertainty is a sign of weakness. I want you to understand it differently. Uncertainty is often the backdrop for God's greatest miracles. Abraham didn't know where he was going when God told him to leave his homeland, but God's hand guided him into the land of promise. The Israelites didn't know how they would cross the Red Sea, but God's hand opened a path where there was no path. Mary didn't know how she, a virgin, would give birth to the Son of God, but his hand overshadowed her and made the impossible possible. And maybe you're in that place right now. You don't know how you're going to pay the bills. You don't know how you're going to finish school. You don't know how you're going to heal from that heartbreak. But let me remind you, your uncertainty is no match for his sovereignty. God doesn't need you to have the answers. He is the answer. He doesn't need you to know the way. He is the way. He doesn't need you to hold it all together. He is the one holding you together when everything else is falling apart. Picture a mountain climber scaling the side of a cliff. Their greatest security isn't their own strength, but the rope anchored above them. That rope is what keeps them from falling into destruction. In your life, God is that anchor. His hand is tied to you. And even if you slip, stumble, or feel weak, his rope doesn't snap. His grip doesn't loosen. His hand doesn't tremble. That's why David said, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. God's hand is not intimidated by the valley you're walking through. So the next time fame fear whispers that you don't know what's going to happen, silence that voice with faith. Say to yourself, I don't know what tomorrow holds, but I know who holds tomorrow. Say, I don't know how this story ends. I know the author is still writing. Say, I don't know how I'll get through this storm, but I know the one who calms the wind and waves with just a word. You don't need certainty to walk with God. You just need trust. You don't need clarity of the whole journey. You just need confidence in his hand. Because when you can't see the path, his hand becomes the light. When you don't understand the season, his hand becomes your stability. And when fear is shouting at you, his hand becomes your peace. The wilderness is not a punishment. It is a workshop. It is the classroom where God teaches the deepest lessons that prosperity will never teach you. It is the place where distractions are stripped away, where your strength is tested, and where your faith is forged. People run from the wilderness because it feels empty, lonely, and confusing. But God chooses the wilderness because it is there that he can shape you without interruption. You may think you are abandoned, but in reality, you are enrolled in God's greatest training program. Look at Moses. He spent 40 years in the wilderness after leaving Egypt. He thought his life was over, that he had failed, that he was forgotten. But in those dry years, God was chiseling him, molding him, shaping his character until he was ready to lead Israel out of bondage. If Moses had stayed in the palace, he would have been a prince. Because he walked through the wilderness, he became a deliverer. The wilderness takes ordinary people and builds extraordinary callings. Consider your own life. Maybe you lost your job and now you're in a wilderness season where you feel like your skills don't matter. Your degree doesn't matter. Your effort doesn't matter. But don't despise that season. That's God's workshop. He's teaching you patience, resilience, humility, and new strategies that will position you for a greater door. When you come out of this wilderness, you won't just have a job, you'll have a testimony that nobody can take away from you. Think about a seed. When it is planted, it goes into the dark soil. No sunlight, no applause, no recognition, just silence and pressure. If you judge the seed in that moment, you'd think it was buried. The truth is, it wasn't buried, it was planted. And the wilderness is the soil where you are planted. It feels like death, but it's preparation for life. Feels like isolation, but it's incubation for greatness. The soil is working even when you don't see it, and God is working even when you don't feel it. Israel left Egypt. They could have marched into the promised land in 11 days, but God took them the long way through the wilderness. Why? Because Egypt had left scars on them. They were free in their bodies, but they were still slaves in their minds. The wilderness was God's workshop to detox their thinking, to teach them how to trust his provision, to train them to follow his presence, to break the chains of fear. Some of you want a shortcut, but shortcuts skip the lessons, and lessons skipped become battles lost later. The wilderness is not a delay, it's development. Sometimes in daily life, you feel stripped of comfort, stripped of company, stripped of answers. That's the wilderness. It's when the friends you leaned on disappear. It's when the doors you knocked on don't open. It's when the familiar places no longer satisfy you. And in that empty space, you start hearing God's voice clearer than ever. Because the wilderness silences the noise. The wilderness exposes who you really are and reveals who God has always been. Imagine a blacksmith in his workshop. He puts raw iron in the fire, then pulls it out and strikes it with a hammer over and over again. Why? Because every strike is shaping it, every flame is purifying it, every hit is building strength into it. The iron doesn't see the sword it's becoming, but the blacksmith does. In the same way, when life is heating you up, when pressure is hitting you from every side, don't think God has abandoned you. You're in the workshop. He's shaping you into a weapon that will not break in battle. There are things the wilderness teaches you that comfort never will. In the wilderness, you learn that man does not live by bread alone, but by every word from the mouth of God. In the wilderness, you discover water can come out of a rock and manna can fall from heaven. In the wilderness, you learn God is not just your Sunday morning God. He's your everyday bread, your daily guide, your midnight comfort. The wilderness strips away your idols until all you have is God, and then you realize He was all you needed all along. Think about your own life again. Maybe you feel like you've been overlooked, like nobody recognizes your gifts, like you're stuck in a place of obscurity. Don't curse that season. That's the workshop. David was anointed to be king, but before he ever wore the crown, he was hidden in the fields tending sheep alone, unseen, forgotten by his family. But it was in that wilderness field that he learned how to sling a stone, write a psalm, and worship God with his whole heart. When the giant Goliath showed up, David wasn't nervous because the wilderness had already trained him how to win battles when nobody was watching. Sometimes God hides you in the wilderness because public exposure too early will kill you. He hides you until your roots are deep enough to handle the weight of the fruit. He hides you until your character is strong enough to match your calling. He hides you until your private victories are strong enough to sustain your public platform. Don't rush the hiding because hidden seasons are holy seasons. The wilderness is uncomfortable, yes. It's lonely, yes. It's stretching, yes. But it is also holy ground. It's where you discover that your strength wasn't enough, but His strength is. It's where you discover that your plan wasn't working. His plan is greater. It's where you stop leaning on your own understanding and start trusting the God who makes a way in the desert and rivers in the wasteland. Obedience is the compass that points you toward destiny when the map of life makes no sense. You can be educated, you can be experienced, you can have strategies and resources, but when you step into uncharted territory, none of that guarantees direction. Keeps you on course is obedience, not to your feelings, not to the opinions of others, but to the still, small voice of God. Because when you can obey in the dark, you will find yourself walking into a light you didn't even know existed. Look at Noah. God told him to build an ark when there was no sign of rain. People laughed at him, mocked him, and called him foolish, but Noah obeyed. Every hammer strike, every wooden plank was an act of obedience. And when the flood came, it wasn't Noah's intellect that saved him. It wasn't his popularity. It was his obedience. His obedience became the compass that guided his family into safety while the world drowned in doubt. That's the power of obedience. In daily life, we all want clarity before we move. We want the full picture before we take the first step. God doesn't work like that. He says, move and I'll reveal, step and I'll show. Think about a GPS again. It doesn't tell you the entire journey at once. It tells you turn by turn, step by step. You don't need to see all the streets ahead of time. You just need to listen for the next instruction. And if you follow that voice, even if the road looks strange, you will end up exactly where you're supposed to be. That's how God leads. Obedience is your turn by turn direction in life. Sometimes obedience feels costly. It requires you to give up your comfort, your pride, or your preferences. Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac, the son he loved, promise he had waited years for. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? But Abraham obeyed, and on that mountain, he discovered something he never would have known without obedience. Jehovah-Jireh, the God who provides. If Abraham had disobeyed, I challenge you to love and uncare enough, he would have missed the revelation. Some of the things you're praying for won't be revealed until you walk in obedience. Think about the small choices of obedience in daily life. Choosing integrity when no one is watching. Choosing to forgive when bitterness feels justified. Choosing to tithe when your finances already feel stretched. Choosing to walk away from toxic circles when everyone else is comfortable. Those choices don't always make sense in the moment, but each one is a compass needle pointing you toward a greater destiny. You can never go wrong by obeying God, even when it feels like you're going against the flow. Obedience is also the bridge between prayer and manifestation. Many people pray for open doors but ignore the instructions God gives them. They want breakthrough without obedience. The miracle is not just in the prayer, it's in following the step God tells you to take. Remember when Jesus turned water into wine? He told the servants, fill the jars with water. It didn't make sense. It wasn't logical. But they obeyed. In their obedience, the miracle took place. If the miracle you're waiting for is locked inside the last instruction you ignored, there's a story of a pilot flying through heavy fog. He couldn't see the runway, couldn't trust his natural eyes, but the control tower gave him instructions. Descend now. Turn left. Hold steady. The only way he landed safely was by obeying the voice guiding him from above. That's what obedience looks like. You may not see the runway. You may not understand the path. But if you obey the voice of God, you will land where you are supposed to. Your survival isn't in your sight. It's in your obedience. Obedience doesn't just protect you. It positions you. Peter had fished all night and caught nothing. Exhausted, frustrated, ready to quit. Then Jesus said, cast your net on the other side. Logic said it was pointless. Experience said it was a waste. But obedience said, nevertheless, at your word, I will. And in that moment of obedience, his boat overflowed with fish. That's what obedience does. It turns empty nets into overflow. It takes your nothing and transforms it into more than enough. Sometimes obedience requires you to look foolish in the eyes of others. Marching around Jericho 7 times didn't make sense militarily. Shouting at walls instead of attacking them didn't make sense strategically. The Israelites obeyed, and those walls that seemed unshakable came crashing down. Don't expect obedience to always look logical. Logic builds walls, but obedience brings them down. In your own life, maybe you're waiting for God to show you the whole plan, but he's only given you one instruction. Don't despise the one instruction. Obedience in the small steps creates momentum for the big ones. Start that business even if you don't have all the funding yet. Apply for that program even if you don't know how you'll manage the schedule. Speak to that person God put on your heart even if you feel unqualified. The blessing is not in knowing everything, it's in obeying the next thing. When you obey, you prove that you trust, and when you trust, God responds. Your obedience is the signal to heaven that you are ready for the next level. It's the proof that you value God's voice above your own reasoning. And when heaven sees that kind of faith, doors open, waters part, giants fall, and destinies are released. Uncharted territory is the breeding ground for uncommon victory. Everybody wants a testimony, but nobody wants the test. Everybody wants a crown, but nobody wants the cross. It is in the unknown, in the places where there are no familiar signs, no clear directions. God does his best work. If you stay in the safe zone, you will only see ordinary blessings. But when you step into the uncharted, you unlock the miracles that others only dream about. Think about Joshua leading the Israelites across the Jordan River. They had never gone that way before. It was uncharted. The waters were raging, the banks were overflowing, the situation was intimidating. But God told them to step in. As soon as the priests carrying the ark put their feet into the water, the river stopped flowing and stood up like a wall. Miracle didn't happen in the comfort of the camp. It happened when they stepped into the uncharted. Victory was waiting on the other side of obedience in a place they had never walked before. In your daily life, uncharted territory may look like starting a new business when you've only ever worked for others. It may look like going back to school after years away. It may look like moving to a city where you don't know a soul. And yes, it feels risky, it feels uncertain, it feels uncomfortable. Understand this. God doesn't call you to comfort, he calls you to conquest. And conquest always requires you to face something unfamiliar. If you never leave the shallow end, you'll never know the thrill of walking on water. Think about David. Before he faced Goliath, no one in his family had ever fought a giant. It was uncharted territory for him, for his lineage, for his nation. Because he had the courage to step where others wouldn't, he won an uncommon victory that changed the course of history. His story teaches us that sometimes God will call you into battles your father never fought, your mother never faced, your friends never conquered. Don't run from it. That giant is the gateway to your destiny. The very thing that looks impossible is the very thing that will prove God's power in your life. Sometimes uncharted territory is emotional, not just physical. It's forgiving someone who hurt you deeply when all you've known is bitterness. That's uncharted ground for many people. But when you forgive, you experience an uncommon victory. Peace that passes all understanding. Maybe uncharted territory for you is choosing to love again after heartbreak. It feels unsafe, it feels terrifying, but stepping into it can lead to a victory of restoration and joy you never thought you'd feel again. Uncharted territory is also about vision. Every innovator, every trailblazer, every leader who changed the world had to step into places no one else had gone before. Thomas Edison had no blueprint for the light bulb. The Wright brothers had no guarantee airplanes would fly. Martin Luther King Jr. had no certainty that his dream could shake nations. They walked into the unknown, and because they did, the world now lives in the aftermath of their uncommon victories. What if the idea God put in your heart is the very thing that could shift generations, but you're too afraid to step into the uncharted? In daily life, it might be as simple as leaving the job that drains you to pursue the passion that fuels you. Or maybe it's breaking a family cycle, poverty, addiction, dysfunction that no one before you has broken. That's uncharted territory. It means you'll face resistance, doubts, even loneliness. But it also means you're positioned for a victory your bloodline has never seen. You may be the first to graduate, the first to own property, the first to live debt-free, the first to walk in emotional health. And when you win, you don't just win for yourself, you win for every generation that comes after you. Think about a ship leaving the harbor. As long as it stays tied to the dock, it will never face storms, but it will also never reach new lands. The purpose of the ship is not safety, it is exploration, and the same is true for you. God didn't design you to stay tied to the familiar. He built you to launch out into the deep. Yes, storms may come. Yes, waves may rise. Uncommon victories are never found at the dock. They're found on the sea of uncertainty, where faith becomes your sail and God's presence becomes your anchor. Sometimes God will deliberately put you in a situation where your experience is useless, where your resources can't help, where your wisdom runs out. Why? Because uncharted territory forces you to lean fully on Him. The Israelites couldn't part the Jordan. David couldn't kill Goliath on his own. Peter couldn't walk on water by himself. It was only when they stepped into the uncharted that God stepped in with His supernatural power. The unknown is not meant to scare you. It's meant to set the stage for God to reveal Himself in a way you've never seen before. Uncharted territory strips you of self-reliance, but clothes you in divine reliance. It breaks the illusion that you are in control and teaches you that the real navigator is God. And when He navigates, He doesn't just take you into battle. He takes you into victory, a victory so uncommon, so undeniable, that everyone who sees it will have to say, surely the Lord's hand was in this. You have walked through the uncertainty. You have endured the wilderness. You have followed the compass of obedience. You have dared to step into uncharted territory. And now it is time to lift your head high and declare with every ounce of faith you have that uncommon victory belongs to you. This is not the hour to shrink back. This is not the time to be timid. This is the moment to rise, to roar, to shake off every chain, and to step boldly into the future that God has already written with His own hand. You are not a mistake. You are not forgotten. You are not wandering without purpose. You are guided. You are chosen. You are anointed, and you are equipped. Came to tell somebody today, you may not see the whole staircase, but take the first step, because the God who started the journey will finish it. You may not feel strong enough to face the storm, but storms are not meant to sink you. They are meant to show you that you were built to walk on water. You may feel surrounded by darkness, but it is in the midnight hour that the brightest light shines. Somebody listening to me needs to stop rehearsing their failures and start prophesying their future. You are more than what you've been through. You are stronger than what tried to break you. You are greater than the labels others have placed on you. Don't you know that every giant you face is really a gateway to a greater blessing? Don't you know that every closed door is only a setup for the door God Himself will open? I challenge you to. Don't you know that the battle you're fighting right now is only proof that there is a victory with your name on it? The enemy would not be attacking you this hard if there wasn't something valuable locked up inside you. Diamonds are formed under pressure. Gold is purified in fire. Warriors are trained in battle. You are not in this place to die. You are in this place to be refined for destiny. Hear me when I say this. Your life is not ordinary. Your path is not random. Your story is not meaningless. Every tear you cried, every setback you faced, every heartbreak you endured, every valley you walked through, it was all shaping you, stretching you, preparing you for a victory so uncommon that generations after you will talk about it. You will be the one who breaks the curse. You will be the one who changes the pattern. You will be the one who rises when others thought you would fall. Lift your head. Square your shoulders. Wipe your tears. This is not the end. This is the beginning of something greater than you can even imagine. Step into the unknown with faith, because the unknown is the stage where God performs his greatest works. Step into the storm with courage, because storms reveal the strength of the anchor. Step into the wilderness with confidence, because the wilderness is where God trains champions. Step into obedience with trust, because obedience is the currency of miracles. And step into uncharted territory with boldness, because uncharted territory is the womb of uncommon victory. Say it with me: I am not defeated. I am destined. I am not broken. I am becoming. I am not abandoned. I am appointed. I will not die in this place. I will live to see the goodness of the Lord in the land of the living. You may have stumbled, but you are still standing. You may have been wounded, but you are still walking. You may have been pushed back, but you are about to push through. This is your season. This is your hour. This is your moment. So walk out of this place knowing that the same God who split the sea, the same God who tore down Jericho's walls, the same God who shut the mouths of lions, the same God who raised Jesus from the grave is the God who is guiding your steps. If he did it before, he can do it again. If he opened doors for others, he can open doors for you. If he gave them uncommon victory, yours is already on the way. And when it arrives, no man, no devil, no circumstance will be able to deny that the hand of God was on your life.